Hi there. My name is Natasha Zielazinski, and I'm very pleased to be joining you for this lecture that's part of the More Music in the Classroom Symposium. I wanted to also apologize for not being able to meet with you in person and just acknowledge the kind of circumstance which has changed the format of the symposium. But I am very much looking forward to being able to speak and discuss some of the themes and questions that come up in this lecture, in the question and answer session following on from this. Before I kind of go into the lecture itself, I just wanted to also say thank you for being invited. I feel very privileged to have the time and space to be thinking about some of these bigger questions about why we do what we do. What is the role of education in society? And what is the role of music and the arts in society? These feel like really important questions to be asking right now. It feels as if we're in a moment of greater and greater division. We're living in a context that has a political discourse, which feels not very constructive and which doesn't support listening. So I think there's something really important and powerful in the work that we do, which addresses how we might think about working together and what it means to be part of an ensemble. What it means to think about how people are together in ways that allow for the expression of different voices, and to find new and creative ways of holding those different voices together. So this is a lot of what I'm thinking about at the moment. It's a very kind of big and broad umbrella to start within. But I think it's really worth acknowledging the context that we're in. So from here, I would really like to introduce myself personally, and I'll start with just a short introduction about my own practice. And then I would like to offer you some thoughts on how I make music, and especially in terms of how I think about ownership and inclusivity. And what that means for the way young people feel that they have the space and kind of tools to express themselves creatively as musicians, as artists, and as human beings. And probably I will use an ensemble which I've run for many years called Future Bound as a kind of case study in a way for thinking about some of these things with you. But I'll start first of all just by sharing a presentation with you here. And I just wanted to start with this image, which is quite personal. This is my daughter, Ada, and my partner, John. And at this particular moment, and especially over the last 6 months, I've been put in a position where my kind of space for my work life and my family life and my life as an artist and my kind of work as a teacher is all inhabiting the same physical environment. So that's created a lot of moments for interesting overlap, sometimes very challenging, but also really fun, and a great kind of way for me to be learning about myself and myself in these different roles. But I also really love this image because for me it captures something about curiosity and experimentation, and as a musician and composer, also just exploring the ways we kind of teach people to think about sound, or the ways we facilitate moments for people to experiment with listening and sound. And then I wanted to share with you just one more image. This one is also quite personal. This is from a ceremony, a kind of marriage ceremony that my partner and I had about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. And it was kind of like a normal ceremony where we had vows and music and dancing and all of these things. But we also, at this moment, had a kind of walk together, a silent walk or a sound walk to the sea. And I think I wanted to include this because for me, in this moment, I had such a powerful sense of my community and a feeling of togetherness. And something that's really important for me in all the work I do is how we understand how we are together. And how we explore and play with different ways of people being together. This is an image of myself playing the cello with a long-term friend and collaborator, Detta Danford. And it also has chamber music at its heart here. Chamber music has been something that's been a driver for my engagement with music ever since I was young. And some of that's about finding people that you can play with and develop relationships with over a long period of time. This is my quartet, the Breakfast Club. And we've been working together for about 8 years now. And it's been a real kind of crucible for me, exploring what it means to compose, to arrange, to perform, and how I think about performance has really been influenced by this group. So this is us performing again in a festival in Athens, and this is part of a promenade performance where we moved through the streets of Athens and then into the grounds of a hospice. I think a lot of what we think about in our approach to performance is context, is place, and how we collaborate with a site, an audience, and also with other artists. And a lot of the work we do is interdisciplinary. This is also the Breakfast Club. This is with Women for Refugee Women. And I think at the heart of this image is a sense of kind of conversation and finding ways of exchanging ideas, forming dialogue across different kinds of boundaries that we might have when we're working with different people. The Quartet Breakfast Club, we've just received a commission from the Barbican, and this autumn we'll be launching into a second project with Women for Refugee Women. I thought I would share this with you. And here's the Breakfast Club, just working again at this hospice in Athens. But I wanted to include these images just because for me, there's something in them about exploring different ways of being together, different ways of thinking about inclusivity, different ways of thinking about participation, and different ways of understanding performance. So that is my work as a kind of performing artist and creator. But I am also a teacher and have been working for a long time in higher education contexts, primarily working with undergraduate and postgrad students to understand their own practice as artists, but also how that might go out and meet a kind of wider social context. And I teach on several degrees at the Guildhall School, one of which I'll mention now, which is a PG Cert in performance teaching. And that is a lot about helping teachers understand the kind of values and drivers which underpin their practice, and then also how to kind of sharpen that practice in the doing of it. But this image here is the band I mentioned earlier called Future Band. And Future Band was an ensemble that was set up in partnership with the Guildhall School and Barbican Creative Learning. It was an ensemble set up by, with my friend Detta Danford, who I mentioned earlier, and and initially we set out to create an ensemble that was for young people to explore composing and performing and what that might mean in a group context. So we worked with young people from the age of 8 to 14 over about 12 years. And the project has just finished last year and is kind of morphed into another iteration, which I can talk about at another time. But I thought I'd include this image of Future Band as a way of introducing the subject. And maybe we could even just take a moment now to have a look. And I'd like to invite you to just think about the qualities you notice in this moment. So this is just a kind of moment captured in a performance. But I'd like to ask you to just notice what is happening, and to ask, what qualities do you see? What qualities are evident to you? For me, when I look at this image, I see very strongly a sense of communication and conversation. And I think when I say conversation, I'm thinking about dialogue and a sense of spaciousness for different voices to be sharing something, for communication to be taking place. There's also a really palpable sense of listening with the ears, but also with the body. And a sense of listening, which is about kind of being really tuned into each other. And that sense of tuning in might be also signaling like an openness or a readiness to follow something, to follow what's happening in the moment as the music unfolds. And the other quality that really jumps out at me in this is a sense of something being shared. And by shared, I mean that there's a sense of equality. It's difficult to see who might be leading. In the back row, there are 3 musicians who are members of the New York Philharmonic. And in the front row, there's 1 Guildhall student and 3 young people. Yet I think there's a sense of equality, a sense of a kind of shared space where each person is respected for what they're offering in that moment. So I wanted to start with that image and then carry on here with this quote from Daisy Swift, who's the learning director at Wigmore Hall. And this is an excerpt from Peter Renshaw's new book, Young Artists Speak Out: Passion, Compassion, and Purpose in the Arts and Education. And Peter Renshaw has been a longtime mentor and friend, and was very involved in helping Detta and I think about Future Band as we set it up, and then in the years that we've been developing the work. But I'll just read this quote to you. I believe the arts have the power to engender equality, to enable expression and exploration of the self, of ideas, can give voice to those who don't have a platform to be heard, and can create a sense of kinship, of community. I think there's a change coming. Young people are marching, speaking out, changing what they eat. Through the internet, they have become creators, and they can use that to become participators, co-creators, change makers. I wanted to include this, first of all, because I think Daisy Swift speaks so eloquently about these ideas of equality that I was kind of putting forth. But also I really appreciate 2 other things. One is that she is speaking about co-creation and what it means to be a creator, and how that is connected to having a voice and being able to have self-expression, exploration of the self, of ideas. I also appreciate her connecting this to a sense of kinship and of community, and the power that not only personal expression has, but when that is kind of within a kind of ensemble or community context. So following on from that, I wanted to just share with you this document, which comes from some research that Detta and I did with Future Band in 2011. So it's quite a long time ago now. But as part of our practice with the band, we were provoked again by Peter Renshaw to not just be thinking about the doing of the band and the making of the music, but also how we understood what it was that we were doing. And I'll come back to that later, but I think that was a really fundamental shift in the way we thought about our work. So in this image, you can see in the center, there's an image of a pot with some people standing around the rim. And this came out of the research that we did, which was co-created with Future Band participants. So we worked with the band as a whole, having group discussions, finding questions that we thought would be good questions to guide our research, and then going about trying to find answers to those questions and pose further questions. But one of the questions we had was about our practice. What is it that we do in the band? And I remember very clearly a young participant called Sasha saying that it was like we were all standing on the rim of a giant pot together, and we're making something, and we don't know what it is we're making, but we are choosing ingredients and adding them, each of us, tasting as we go, making decisions together, stirring. And it was such a powerful image for us of this idea that there can't be too many cooks, that actually the process for Future Band was many cooks working together. And I also wanted to draw your attention to the kind of lower half here where it says our identity. There's a quote here from another young person which says, "It's not mine, it's ours." And I think somehow this way of working, which felt like many cooks, also felt very much collectively owned, that it didn't belong to Detta and I as band leaders or any one person at any given time, but that not only the music and the process, but the band itself was owned by everyone who is in it. I also wanted to share with you this quote from a young cellist called Max, who was young at the time, 13, but now he's studying in the Netherlands. And he says, "Here you have people, almost leaders, who treat everyone else as equal and don't have their pre-made ideas of what music is and how you play it. You can come along with an idea and people have a chance to pool whatever kind of creativity they have." And I think this is great. I love that he calls us almost leaders. But this is speaking to this idea of equality again, and that being connected to shared leadership. The idea that leadership is fluid and moving, and that a kind of leader or teacher in the room might also be a fellow traveler, somebody who's sitting alongside you trying to find something new. And I think it also speaks to this idea of openness, that anyone could have an idea, and that your ideas wouldn't be kind of rated on a system of who has the most experience or what idea is the best, but that we're kind of trying to pool ideas and welcome and accept things from all corners. I wanted to share with you, following on from that, this model for thinking about ensemble. First of all, for thinking about sound, but also for thinking about ensemble and how groups might make music together and learn together. So it's actually something that I've adapted with Detta from a session we went to. We attended a music class on Japanese chanting, a particular form called Shomyo, with a wonderful teacher called Junko Ueda. And this was actually her model for explaining the difference between her style of chanting and what she understood to be Western classical choral traditions. So in the top diagram, you see a circle with lots of X's in it. And she said for her, this is how she understood Western classical music, especially in a kind of choral setting, which is that each voice was kind of striving towards being an X, being some kind of ideal sound, and that the kind of power of the sound came from a really particular way of thinking about unison, everybody striving to be the best X possible, and that the kind of beauty and power of the sound would come from that. And then below that, she was describing what it meant to have a kind of sound in Shomyo chanting, and that in that kind of chanting, there was no X that everyone should be striving for, but that the power of the sound would come from each individual voice being itself in the most direct and clear way possible. So that the power and beauty of this sound would come from X plus a star, plus a triangle, plus a circle, each voice doing its very best to be itself. And that when that was happening at the same time, that is where the sense of sound and togetherness was coming from. And I think for Detta and I, when we attended that seminar and then had a discussion later, we thought, oh, this is a wonderful way of helping us understand future band, things like future band, and also our teaching. So in terms of making sound, are we asking everyone to try and find a unison sound? Are there moments in a creative music making project where we might be all striving to be an X? And that X might be coming from something external, so wanting to sound like something other than ourselves, or it might be that somebody in the band has an idea and we're all trying to follow that one idea. But then also in the second model, are there other moments that might look more like this second model where we're facilitating a space or some kind of framework that can hold many different ideas? And so this model is one of multiplicity and one of finding a sense of togetherness and ensemble and strength from many different voices, each being able to be different but be held together. And I think in terms of teaching, we can also look at this as a metaphor for how we teach. Are there moments in our teaching practice that we're trying to deliver a particular idea, an X, and it's very important that not only us, but everybody in the room understands that X to be a particular thing? And are there other moments in our teaching where we can facilitate a kind of learning that is based on each person finding their own individual response? And allowing for those differences, in fact, celebrating and enjoying those differences and those different responses. So this is just an image of lots of people trying to be one thing. And it's something, you know, are we all trying to be an X here? Are we all trying to find a sense of togetherness by being the same? And I think this is something that comes up when you think about equality. Does equality mean all being the same? Or is there another model of equality which can exist also, which can enrich the way we think about that, which allows each person in a room to be different and to occupy their own space, which allows us to kind of celebrate our differences and use that kind of challenge to help us work together better. Aside from this kind of thinking about equality and how we work together and how that has an impact on our ownership of content, I also wanted to think about reflective practice. And for me, that so powerfully is connected to ownership, because if we're able to reflect on what we've done and understand what we've done and be thinking about it critically, it helps us have a greater sense of ownership so that we're able to shape the questions and the process as well as the answers. And when we do that, then it really starts to feel like it's ours. I think that's a little bit evident in that document I showed you earlier with the future band research, where simply by embarking on the process of doing the research, we were already putting in place tools that helped band members understand what it was we were doing, how we might do it, and then therefore they were able to kind of shape the language that we use to describe our work, but also to shape the project itself as we developed it over 10 years. So these are just some images of us working with Future Band in different ways. And this is a young composer working with some Guildhall students. Thinking about reflective practice as something that doesn't have to just be sitting down together talking, but can be quite active and can draw on the same tools that we use for making music and thinking about practical work together in a classroom? Can we reflect through our playing? Can we play our answers? And I just wanted to finish with this quote from Katie Bunting, who is a graduate of the Performance and Creative Enterprise course at the Guildhall. And I was her teacher at one point, and I'm still teaching on that course now. And again, this is an excerpt from Peter Renshaw's book, Young Artists Speak Out. But I wanted to include it because for me, she kind of captures a lot of what I've been picking up on in this lecture. And I think she does it in a way that also poses some good questions. So I'll just read it to you now. She says, "Art is what tackles division and fosters inclusion. Art creates a space for optimism about the future to be found. And most importantly, art is able to give a voice to anyone who wants to share their thoughts or opinions, regardless of age, gender, race, religion, or circumstance. The most important thing that growing up with the space and skills to express myself creatively gave me was a belief that my voice was worth listening to and that what I had to say was important. I wouldn't want to live in a world where young people were told anything other than this." And in reading this the other day, I just felt so inspired. First of all, her statement, "Art creates a space for optimism about the future." I find myself needing to be optimistic about the future now and looking for things which can support me in doing that. And also that through art and or in our kind of context, that is making music together. And specifically in the way that I do it, it's in thinking about how we create music, new music, what it might do to kind of address division and foster inclusivity. And the way that it does that is that it allows us to express ourselves and to be creative. And it even more kind of fundamental than that is that first we need to create space for those voices from our students, and we need to let them know that they're being listened to, and that also what they have to say is important and will be respected. So I think that's a kind of good place to finish this lecture and leave you. But I also wanted to leave you with some questions that maybe can connect into our question and answer session after this. And the questions I thought to kind of pose are, what are the ways you already support your students in your classroom to express themselves? How do you create moments for self-expression? And what are the challenges for you? And this is kind of, again, to just address that the fact that I'm not a classroom teacher, and also I'm not Dutch. So I'm really aware that my context might be different from your own. But I thought this would be a nice way of just kind of opening out a discussion between us. And then a final question here. What resources do you have to support you in developing this further? And are those resources, they might be related to people as resources. So what peers do you have, mentors, forums, possibly something coming out of this symposium? And what other alternate resources do you have? And what do you need more of? And maybe that's a good place to leave it in thinking about you as teachers and how you might be further supported in supporting your own students to find greater self-expression through creative music making. Thank you very much for your time. I'll just stop this share now. Yeah, I am very much looking forward to meeting some of you. Thank you very much, and looking forward to it. Thank you. Bye. Which is asking us to think about identity. And oh, I think there's
microphone.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's a kind of a kind of raised awareness about understanding who we are and who we are in relation to each other, and what our kind of biases, assumptions, and the kind of cultural baggage we might kind of carry with us. But I think maybe not a kind of antidote at all, but just one thing that we can really do to kind of think about that is to kind of be open and to kind of listen and to be ready to kind of have dialogue. So, I think the way to kind of think about these things is to be as open as we can and to allow space for these conversations, to even allow space to have these questions be part of our conversations. That's important. And also another thought I've kind of had recently about identity is just to allow ourselves to get it wrong. Because I feel like there's a lot of pressure right now for any change to be the right way and like a perfect fix. And actually, if we can just say that there are some issues right now and that we're working on it, and that as we go, we may kind of stumble a bit, or we might get entangled. But that sometimes getting a little bit more entangled is the way out of a mess.
Yeah, it's worse that we don't try than that. Yeah. Can you just highlight a little bit more how, for you, creativity, the aspect of creativity in music education, is important, both in relation to ownership and inclusivity?
Yeah.
Why this emphasis on creativity in your whole practice?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I was having a chat about it with my partner the other night. I mean, I think there's one thing, which is that that is what I do. I think why I wanted to introduce my own practice as an artist, first of all, is because I wanted to really clearly show you my perspective and where I'm coming from, and to own that, because that is so much kind of wrapped up with how I teach. And so that's a part of my practice. But I think fundamentally, it doesn't have to involve actually making new music. That's my identity, but I don't think it's useful for everyone to suddenly become composers. But what I was talking about with my partner is this, often people talk about music as a language. And I think that's a really great metaphor. But the way language is taught is that there's the kind of formal teaching of language, which is around kind of grammar and understanding and spelling and all this. But also formally, we teach creative writing. And we encourage students to kind of write sentences, write paragraphs, write short stories, not because we want them to become a writer. We teach them that because that's part of having fluency and being able to express yourself. So and also informally, we have all the kind of listening in our environment. We have the invitation to play, to copy. We don't kind of tell kids, don't say ga, ga, ga. We look back at them and we're like, Gaga, she just said ga, 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 and we play with it. And we, so I think if we could do that for music and kind of put that kind of philosophy or way of thinking about, or perspective into the way we think about music education, what might we have? We might have really fluent musicians everywhere in society, not just kind of people who are lucky enough and privileged enough to be good enough to warrant carrying on as professional musicians.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a question, do you notice a difference in the perseverance, that's a difficult word, perseverance of young people compared to a decade years ago? Example, given the patience to be able to truly read or listen carefully. So do you see a difference?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think at the moment, at least here in the UK, it feels like, and actually from what I see, instrumental education is just on such a kind of steep decline. And as part of that instrumental education and formal music education, there's also a lack of literacy. But I wouldn't say it's because of the young people not having attention. I would say that maybe there are kind of bigger forces at play. Orchestras are disappearing, community orchestras are disappearing. So there's no place to kind of go and no reason to have to read. So, yeah. I don't know, maybe we're in a moment of change as well, culturally, and how music is perceived and what kinds of music are popularly dominant.
That's one way to put it. I was curious because you had some wonderful questions for your audience, our audience today. I think I copied them. Well, maybe we can give space to those questions as well at the moment. So one of your first questions was, what are the ways you are already supporting students in your classroom to express themselves? How do you create moments of self-expression? Are there any people in the room that would like to answer that? For instance, in the chat, so that Natasha can respond to that. People feel free to. Welmut is writing, making our own music piece and play it. And Welmut, do you mean making our own music piece by creating the piece together with the whole group and everybody taking part? It's also
just while Welmut is responding, I noticed a comment earlier from someone called Hester, who said, if you don't have that yourself, how are you going to give that to the children? And I just, again, I know you kind of also rephrased the question around that, Rene, but I don't think an answer to kind of inclusivity and ownership is everyone composing per se. But I think it's more kind of what that girl, Katie Bunting, was hinting at in her quote, which is just, what we can give our students is that we really listen to their voices and we really respect what they have to say. And in order to do that, we have to kind of ask them questions and then wait for them to answer.
That's also what Tim Elsinga is pointing at when he writes, asking the kids what they want to do and get their input. But it's also scary business because it is asking something else from you as a teacher instead of being the one that knows everything.
Yeah, and what if they give you an answer you don't like or you think is inappropriate or just makes everything difficult? or what if they just I don't know if any of you have come across this, but I know from working with teachers, sometimes as you're starting to kind of change your teaching practice, you might be practicing yourself how to ask questions. And, we have to practice these things to get better at it. And sometimes you get students who say, I just preferred it when you just told me what to do. Why are you asking me all these questions? Or could you please just give me the answers?
It's also, Hester is now adding the word to explore together. I think that is a key word, especially in the practice that you have described. There's another entry now from Matthijs. Moments for self-expression. Make sure you create a safe environment. In the meantime, enough space to feel free and inspired to create. What would you say to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think we could have a whole presentation on that. How do we create a safe space? And also, I think there's something that you said about a safe environment. I think it's really interesting to kind of think about the environment for learning, and not just the physical environment, but the kind of emotional environment for learning. So what we do as teachers, how our own kind of feelings as teachers are also really present in the teaching. If we have feelings of fear, those feelings can be part of the teaching. So, sometimes some of the work I've done with teachers is just in kind of thinking about the qualities you want to have really present in your own self that you bring to the children you're working with, whether that's kind of joy or, I don't know, curiosity, or vulnerability, like whether you let yourself as a teacher model vulnerability to your students so that if they see you getting it wrong and that's okay, then maybe they're allowed to also get it wrong.
And what struck me in all the pictures that you've shown, that there was no space the same and no using of the space in the same way. There was none that looked like an ordinary music studio. There was all kinds of different setups where to organize the people participating. Your other difficult to answer question for all of us is, what are the challenges? What are the challenges if you want to let's say include inclusivity in your teaching and include sharing ownership? What are the challenges? Is there any response from people in the field with experiences here that can drop them in the chat?
Someone also said here, I asked the children for input many times, but sometimes it's difficult to listen not only to the majority. And I think that's such a good point, that one of the challenges is that we only listen to the loudest voices, or the most kind of frequently spoken voices. Or so, yeah, how do we do it? How can we experiment with different ways of eliciting responses? Because it's interesting when you kind of think about learning styles. Sometimes the kids who are most likely to kind of first raise their hand in a discussion won't be the kids who will write the most kind of long discourse, or won't be the kids who would first volunteer to do something. So kind of finding different learning styles or different learning modes to elicit responses.
Mm-hmm. There's a remark by Zenzi. He or she brings up the word motivation. So to let the children be able to motivate themselves. Well, that's easy said.
Yeah. Yeah, and also by asking them what music they like and starting from there. Yeah, that's a really good starting point, I think. I think sometimes, I like to kind of think about my own teaching practice as a kind of collaborative teaching practice that lets, you be a participant, because we don't want to only kind of have the agenda of this. I don't know if you've kind of thought about this before, but sometimes participation or collaboration you can think about as two forces kind of meeting each other like this. And if one's doing all the pushing and the other just kind of falls back, then it doesn't stand. So I think, kind of finding a way to meet your students. What are you offering? What are you giving? And giving space for them to meet you. Then you get this kind of strength of energy and force going together. But if there's too much you or too much student, sometimes maybe we risk finding a good through line, a good meeting point, being able to deliver the things. We have to be able to share our experience as teachers as well, and to kind of help guide, to be mentors,
Now, and I know this is a little bit counterintuitive for you, but let me give it a try to bring you in the position to give us tips and good advice. You brought up the questions of what resources do you have and what are the challenges for people that want to actually start this practice in this new initiative. Do you have some tips or advice or?
I don't know if I have tips or advice. A first thought that just kind of sprung to my mind is that maybe it can be formal and informal, So, and that both are really kind of valid ways of finding support.
Finding support?
Yeah, and I think for me, maybe I'm thinking back to that kind of slide I showed early on about community and the people you gather around you. Because I think whenever we're trying something new, it's nice to know we're not alone and in a desert and kind of little silos. And also we can learn from each other. We kind of, model the way we.
But how do you do that? Because you're never in each other's classroom.
Yeah. So can there be, more formally, maybe something that could come out of this symposium is kind of working groups or groups of teachers from different backgrounds or classes that are meeting together, or similar backgrounds and kind of classroom levels, to share practice, to share questions.
I noticed that you talked a few times about data, but you do data Danford. You do a lot of teaching together. Yeah. Is that something that can be helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I think exactly that, finding the people that you can work with. And that might start in groups, and then maybe from a kind of larger group, you find partners or people that can kind of provoke you and ask you challenging questions and that you can almost get in little fights with. But then hopefully you kind of get somewhere from that practice together.
Okay, well, I think we have 30 seconds left, and there is a question of Maud. Could you please repeat the name of the book you mentioned in your lecture?
Yes, I think it's called Young Artists Speak Out.
It's Peter Renschel's latest. We'll share the title in the chat with you. And I think with these wonderful people that are organizing this, I got a notice that there was only 5 minutes left 5 minutes ago. So this is about the time to say thank you, Natasha, for your wonderful contribution and your enlightening and inspiring introduction. I switched to the Dutch language now to take upon my role as Matthijs van Nieuwkerk this afternoon. I have to do some announcement in Dutch, but thank you so much, Natasha. I look forward to see you soon.
Oh, thanks very much.
Okay, if I can find my cursor, which is quite... daar ben ik weer. Fijne deelnemers, bedankt voor het kijken. Ik heb nu mijn eigen autocue voor het eerst in mijn leven. We gaan nu verder met de workshop vakintegratie. In deze workshop vakintegratie leer je verschillende vormen van vakintegratie herkennen en onderzoek je welke vorm van vakintegratie bij jezelf en jouw school past. Aangezien er vanwege de techniek beperkte plekken zijn, vragen we iedereen die zich niet heeft opgegeven voor deze workshop de Zoom-sessie voor nu te verlaten. En wel onmiddellijk. Vanaf 4 uur kan je weer inchecken voor de lezing van Adam Ockelford over de effecten van muziek op kinderen met speciale behoeftes, zoals kinderen met autisme of blinde kinderen. Heb je je opgegeven voor de workshop? Blijf dan vooral kijken. Ik wens iedereen een goede dag toe.